I am so glad to see you guys here again after taking a break for a couple of weeks. My name is Mohammed. I'm a real estate investor and realtor based out of New York, and I'm hopefully your favorite YouTube host on most things real estate. Now, I've been getting a lot more questions about the possibilities of house hacking in New York, so much so that I figured I'd make another video about it. If you want to watch my first video, I'll put the link up here or somewhere here. I don't exactly remember, but I'll put it in there once I'm making the edits on the video. But in this week's episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about the ultimate guide for house hacking in New York City because I'm going to be answering a lot of common questions that I've been getting over the last couple of months. So without further ado, let's jump right into this, guys. I think we're getting there. Now, before I jump into the meat of this video about the ultimate house hacking guide in New York City, I want to make something very clear. This video is going to be answering a lot of common questions that I feel on a day-to-day basis as a real estate investor and a broker. So I hope you're able to get some value from it. And by no means is this video going to be answering all and every single specific question. So if you have something that I haven't been able to answer, my contact information is below. I'll put it in the description. I'll try to put it on this video as well. Feel free to reach out to me. I answer all calls and DMs and comments. I am checking my phone regularly, so please reach out to me, or you can text me or even leave a voicemail. Now, to jump right into it, the very first question I get asked quite a bit is, hey, is it even possible to house hack in New York City? I mean, I have an entire video about it. The short answer is yes, it is. The longer answer is it depends on what your actual goals are. The reason I say it depends is usually if someone's asking me this question and they have this idea in the back of their mind that they'll be able to cash flow positive every single month. So if they have a mortgage in place, if they take in their revenue from the rental income minus their expenses, they think they'll be making a small profit every single month. I tell them right up front, hey, that's not going to be the case 99% of the time. It is, it happens in very rare instances, but most of the time in high cost of living cities like New York, you're not going to be cash flowing for the first couple of years at the very least until rental amounts catch up because your mortgage payment is going to stay fixed, so you'll be in a position to slowly increase rents over time as demand for housing increases. Now, the second question I usually get asked is, what should I be looking for? Like, where should I even be starting? What's going on? Like, what's the best area to invest in? A lot of questions along the lines of, now that I have an idea that I want a house hack in New York, where should I actually start, or what should I actually, what should I be looking for? The first thing I usually advise my clients is figure out how much money you have to play around with, right? You have to figure out what your pre-approval amount is, as well as how much cash you have in the bank, because that's going to come into play in terms of what areas and property types that you can and can't focus in on. For example, if you have a pre-approval of a certain amount and you know that disqualifies you from 3 units or 4 unit buildings, it's not going to make too much sense for you to have that deal analysis in the back of your mind while you're looking at different properties to crunch the numbers on, and you may have to reevaluate your overall goals, and maybe even reconsider reinvesting in New York City. Now, you also have to keep in mind, a lot of times people will ask, hey, what if I buy an apartment in New York and rent out on a room by room basis? I think that's definitely an easier way to get in versus just buying a standalone home. The reason I say that is obviously apartments are usually cheaper than standalone homes or multifamily homes. The one thing to keep in mind though is there's a significant difference between a condo in New York City and a co-op in New York City. Co-ops are a no-go. In very rare instances, sure. However, they are very strict about landlords renting out apartments because co-ops are usually meant for homeowners or people that want to be able to know who their neighbors are and don't want to have a new tenant every single year or a new roommate every couple of months. So you want to aim for condos and make sure that you're investing in neighborhoods that ultimately make most sense for you. So if you have to look at your budget and you have to figure things out about where you can and can't afford, you also have to keep in mind that the area that you're going to be investing in, that you're going to be buying in, is the area that you're going to be living in because you're house hacking. And number two, the area is also going to be attracting the tenant. Now, what I mean by that is there's a big difference between buying the biggest and best house in a bad neighborhood and buying a small house in a really good neighborhood, because one of these areas is going to give you more of a headache tenant and the other area isn't. I'll let you figure out which one is which. Now, the second question I get asked quite a bit is, hey, what is the best piece of advice that I can possibly give you? And it goes back to the first point I made about figure out what your goals are. Like, truly figure out what your long-term goals are and whether or not you even have an exit strategy in place. A lot of times people might come into the house hacking journey and say, well, I want to buy a house and I can, live in and house hack in and rent out. But they might not necessarily have thought about what will happen after the next several years, which is totally fine. If you're wanting a house that you want to live in New York City forever and that's what you want to make your forever home, That's fine. That's a goal in and of itself. But if you know that you're not going to be living in New York City long term and you're just having this property as a an investment property, then you also want to make sure what your exit goals are as well. So you have to figure out what your timeline is as well as what your monetary goals are, because as I mentioned, New York City is not a cash flow market, and if you go into it with the mindset of, hey, I'm going to start cash flowing from day one, you're going to have a bad time. And I don't want anyone to get a misunderstanding of what the New York City market is like, because it's not a cash flow market per se. It's an appreciation market, an equity market. The second piece of advice I would give is very similar to what I already mentioned. Figure out your monies. Figure out how much money you have set aside to play around for this project, as well as what your approval amount is, because that's going to dictate very tangibly which areas you can and can't focus on. The third bit of advice that I would also give is don't limit yourself to just long-term rentals. The reason I say that is because there is value, especially nowadays in 2023, with a lot of traveling nurses and other employees that are working on contract. They need housing for like 3 to 6 months at minimum, but not anything over 12 months. And that's where medium-term rentals come in. And there's a couple of websites out there that actually cater to this subset of people in the employment population. So if you have trouble finding those, please reach out to me and I'm happy to point you in the right direction. One thing I would also make very clear, you have to understand the New York City zoning regulations just a little bit enough, or at least work with someone that has a good understanding of that. That's me right here, because you also have to make a distinction on what you can and can't rent out. For example, basements versus cellar. I have a video about this on my social media that I'll put a screenshot here, or I'll put a link in the description below, that I think you might find very helpful. Now, the fourth question, or should I say the third question that I get asked quite a bit is, hey, if I have to get an approval, who should I work with? What kind of banks, banking products are going to make sense for me? I always advise my clients, work with a local bank. This is no knock to the Chase, the City banks, the TD banks, but they just don't have the very best understanding of the local market, because they're applying their framework to the broader North American market, which is fine if that's who you want to work with, if you have a lot of deposits with those banks. However, I recommend working with local lenders because, number one, they have a better understanding of the New York City market. They understand property prices here are higher than the national average. They understand the taxes here. They can also help you make sure that you're getting the rental income counted towards your approval, because then they can use that to help you get your approval higher, or even help you with the mortgage payment down the line, because they understand that even though your debt service coverage ratio might not be in the best, they know that the rental revenue is going to help you out quite a bit more. And the final question that I get asked is, hey, what should I be keeping in mind? What are some of the common things and pitfalls that you sort of run into that you've noticed other people doing? Again, it's going to sound very repetitive and I'm going to be beating a dead horse here, but New York City is not a cash flow market 99.99% of the time. So your cash flow isn't going to be amazing. I mean, you'd be lucky if you're breaking even, and that's absolutely the case. You will be very lucky if you're breaking even, but don't be surprised if you end up paying a couple of bucks a month towards your own mortgage and principal, just because I mentioned it's not a cash flow market. So your overall rental revenue for the first couple of years might not cover your overall expenses immediately. However, because your mortgage payment is going to stay fixed and your rental revenue is going to keep going up because you're going to be gradually increasing the rents, ultimately you'll be cash flow black or cash flow positive, because that's when you'll be able to start reaping the benefits of the cash flow. The one thing to also keep in mind is if you're buying a house hacking property and you have an intention to sell it in a few years, I typically will recommend not selling it within 3 years or maybe even within 5 years, just because at that point, even though you'll be making a little bit of money, I personally don't think it's enough to justify you from exiting unless you have any kind of other external circumstances. The minimum I recommend holding is 5 years, or 5 to 7 years is usually the minimum hold. That'll give you enough time to get the property appreciation where you want it to, as well as getting your cash flow positive in a position where other investors or other buyers would see that favorably and then be able to offer you a premium for that property. So you'll walk away with enough money to be happy with. I hope you guys really enjoyed this house hacking guide, because I had a lot of fun answering these questions, and I hope that you'll be able to find some value from it, because I'll definitely be sending this video out to everyone that asks me any of these common questions. Have a nice weekend, guys.